coffee next time, and my mules will die.
I'm just kidding, Mr. General. I'm just
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being here. We appreciate it very much. Grocery stores have made a mess on aisle 5, and we need the Attorney General to help us clean it up.
Mop and bucket.
That's right. As we all remember, during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, the supply of necessary goods, such as toilet paper, beef, and eggs, decreased, and the price of these goods skyrocketed. One would think as society has returned to normal from the pandemic and our supply chain has increased production, the cost of groceries would lower. Yet every time I go to the grocery store, it seems like the prices of groceries increases. If you also leave the grocery store shocked by the amount that's on the receipt, you're not alone. And it is not in your head. Within the last 3 weeks, the FTC released a report, right here, regarding a study it conducted on the effect of the COVID-19 pandemic on grocery prices and supply chain issues. Although the study did not look at the cause of the increase in prices of groceries, the FTC notes in its report that publicly available data suggests that the increase of grocery prices is due to stores increasing revenue, not inflation. Specifically, the report states that during the pandemic, the amount of money companies made over their total costs, in other words, their profit, rose substantially and has remained elevated. For example, food and beverage retailer revenues increased to more than 6% over total costs in 2021, higher than their most recent peak in 2015 of 5.6%. In the first 3 quarters of 2023, despite the end of the pandemic, retailers' profits rose even more, with revenue reaching 7% over total costs. This data casts doubts on assertions that rising prices at the grocery store are simply moving in lockstep with retailers' own rising costs due to inflation. The FTC concluded that additional study on this issue must be conducted. This additional study is imperative to understanding the rising prices of groceries and how we can protect consumers from any price gouging. As an example, meat and poultry are the highest items pushing inflation. Four companies now control the processing of 80% of beef, 70% of pork, and almost 60% of chicken. That means there's fewer companies, and light touch regulations means more consumers are paying more. So again, fewer companies, light touch regulation mean consumers pay more. And corporate profits are at a 70-year high if you look at this chart. And it's estimated that price gouging is responsible for 50% of inflation. And that's why we call upon Attorney General Tong to send a letter of inquiry to all major grocery retailers to disclose their profits and costs so that we may learn whether the increase in grocery prices is due to inflation or greed. We will not stand idly by while corporate greed manipulates a public emergency for their own profit. And now I'd like to call up the leader of our caucus, Senate President Martin Looney.
Thank you, Mr. Majority Leader. As we all know, it's unfortunate but historically true that profiteering and price gouging tend to rear their ugly heads during times of crisis. As far back as World War II, then Senator Harry Truman came to national prominence by heading the commission that revealed profiteering in production for products being sold to the government as part of the war effort. He exposed a number of cases of that. It made him nationally prominent and led to his being selected in the 1944 Democratic ticket. So it's not new. Unfortunately, that's one of the ugly faces of capitalism. And what we've seen since in Connecticut, we saw that and during times of hurricanes, we saw price gouging regarding the sale of dry ice and the sale of electric generators. So we passed a law that dealt with price gouging regarding products. And a few years later, we amended that law and expanded it to include price gouging regarding services, because during winter storms we saw in many cases the cost that was being asked for of homeowners to clear snow off their roofs or to do other kinds of snow removal had just spiked up enormously. And that is a problem of taking advantage of times of crisis. And in our current law, there does have to be a declared crisis in order for the price gouging laws to come into effect. But as Senator Duff said, we're now looking at a case of the crisis caused by the pandemic, and the supply chain issues, of course, caused some increase in prices across a broad range of things. But there seems to be some indication that the price of groceries have stayed artificially high in the wake of that, even though the crisis justification for it has passed. So it's another case of corporate opportunism to add to profits at a time when it's really not justified. So we know that our Attorney General is vigilant on all these fronts. We want to be able to make sure that he has the resources that he needs to go forward and to have the leverage legally that's needed in order to deal with this newest manifestation of something that is a historic and chronic problem. So I want to thank members of our caucus who are here with us today in support of this initiative. And now I'd love to introduce the Attorney General.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you to the Senate Democratic Caucus and my colleagues here. I was never a senator, I was a House member, but miss you guys all the same. And I want to thank the Majority Leader for his initiative on this. You know, sometimes people wonder how these things get started. Well, this one started with Bob Duff calling me and saying, did you see that FTC report on grocery prices and on food prices at supermarkets? And I hadn't actually seen it, and it was because the Senate Majority Leader reached out to me that our office started to take a hard look at that. And so we're here because of Bob's vigilance, and I want to thank the Majority Leader for his work on that and for calling on us to commence an inquiry. So we're here today to announce that the state of Connecticut is conducting an inquiry into grocery and food prices at our state supermarkets, with a focus on trying to determine whether or not food prices and grocery prices on everyday groceries are unreasonably or excessively high, unlawfully high, and we really want to find out whether there's any price gouging going on here in Connecticut, particularly at our supermarkets. So before we commenced our inquiry today, I thought long and hard about how this impacts me and my family. And so two things really bother me, and that's the price of nuts and the price of eggs. So nuts are really important when you're trying to lose weight because they're good for, well, they're healthy, first of all, but they're a good way to count calories. And I'm looking at Pat. Senator Miller is always encouraging me to eat healthier. And so I eat a lot of nuts. And if you like almonds, like I do, they're super expensive. And the price of almonds are ever going up. And then, of course, eggs. I'm also a big fan of soft-boiled and hard-boiled eggs. Also, if you're on an exercise regimen after you turn 50 and you're trying to reduce your carb intake, a couple of eggs in the middle of the day can get you through the rest of the day. But the cost, not even of organic eggs or free range or cage-free eggs, but basic eggs in the supermarket sometimes are several dollars higher than they used to be. And that really hits all of us, all families here in Connecticut and across the state. Nuts, eggs, things that all of us depend on every single day to live. Food is not a nice to have, right? It's basic to our survival. So we're going to use our powers here to conduct this inquiry. I should note that during the pandemic, there was a spike in the price of eggs on a regional basis, and it was found that there was likely price gouging by producers. And New York took the lead on an investigation and a prosecution of producers for price gouging. We were unable to take action in Connecticut because our price gouging statute still limits us to the immediate retailer. We don't have the ability to go up the chain to producers, manufacturers, the big guys at the top of the supply chain. And so I know that the Majority Leader and the Senate President and others in this caucus support efforts to expand our price gouging authority so that we can go after anybody who's trying to take advantage of consumers and shoppers here in Connecticut. I should note that the last time the Majority Leader and I were here, we were announcing a multi-state antitrust lawsuit in cooperation with the federal government against Apple. This is part of that work. We in Connecticut are playing a leading role on some of the most consequential antitrust cases in our country today. We're leading the national generic drug price fixing case. We're leading on the Amazon antitrust case. We're in the leadership in the Google antitrust case and in Apple. But it should come as no surprise that as hospitals consolidate here in Connecticut, right, so too are supermarkets. I see this as core to our work here in the legislature and the Attorney General's office. This is what it means to do consumer protection work. Every single day, people in Connecticut, families are getting squeezed, right? Every single day we're getting squeezed by the cost of utilities, by the cost of internet, by the cost of smartphones and devices, by the cost of medicine, medication, gasoline, rent, food. Okay, and our job collectively is to push back on that squeeze and to give Connecticut families just a little bit of breathing room so they can provide for their kids, so they can raise a family, so they can pay for violin lessons and sports, so they can afford to save for college and retirement, pay the mortgage, pay the rent. So thank you again to Senate Democrats, the Senate President, and Majority Leader for bringing us here today and for spurring us on to conduct this inquiry.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Attorney General. Thanks for all your work too, and the conversation we've had, and all the consumer work that you've done over the last 5-6 years. And it does help to be a legislator before you become Attorney General, because it's here and you know the process.
But a House member always.
That's what they say to me too.
So is Marty.
Right. That's right. So we also want to announce today that we're going to be filing an amendment on Senate Bill 3, which will provide the Attorney General with additional powers on price gouging. Right now, the Attorney General, as he mentioned, he has limited powers during emergencies, during certain times, but we want to be able to expand that. So he has the authority, the ability to look at this a little more deeply, with a little more authority, and get to the bottom and the root causes of some of these issues. So we'll be filing that hopefully today or tomorrow, and it'll be publicly available for folks to take a look at. I also just want to make sure we introduce some of our caucus members, and if they want to say a few words, to feel free. We have Senator Anwar, Senator Kushner, Senator Marr, Senator Rahman, Senator Miller, and the floor is open to anybody who would like to say a few words.
I'll just add a couple of thoughts, primarily being that at the end of this entire effort is that one individual who's barely surviving financially, and the option of not eating, not drinking, not taking care of your children is not an option. So it's our responsibility to make sure that we take care of that individual, the one who's the most vulnerable, a single mom with 3 children, or another individual who's going through, who's disability, who's trying to get the food. So we want people to be able to make money, but not in a manner that you're hurting the public. And that's what this is about.
I just want to say, I grew up in the grocery business, a small independent grocer. My dad, my grandfather, my uncles, my great uncles. So it was in our family. And I really appreciate your comments about shopping locally, because it's really true that we need to support our local businesses. And they are at a disadvantage in terms of competing with the big corporations. But I know that this is something that's really important. All of us, hear about inflation from our constituents. We hear about it all the time. People are suffering. Wages are not going up as fast as the cost of all of the essentials. And so for us, we really appreciate the activity. First of all, thank you, Senator Duff for really paying attention to this issue, and Senator Looney for always having our back on everything that's important. And I also want to thank the Attorney General, because this collaboration is so important to keeping our, Connecticut growing and keeping us strong. So thank you.
Thank you.
So when Senator Duff mentioned chicken is something that is the bedrock of my particular diet and many, many, many families. And the Attorney General mentioned being on the other side of 50. Well, I might be a little bit beyond that, so chicken is really important. And I've been so surprised after the pandemic not to see the prices start to roll back again. And they haven't. And they've stayed at this elevated price. And I know the impact for me when I go to the grocery store. When I think about the people and the families in the community, this is an important step that we're taking, because we need to make sure that families can afford to feed their children. And they will have to make significant choices when they're in the grocery store with these prices at the place that they are. So by making sure that we are not gouging our constituents, I am so appreciative of the leadership of the Senate and of the Attorney General's office to make sure that we are supporting the people of Connecticut.
Thank you. Thank you. I have 3 children, 5, 7, and 11. I go grocery store every day, like Attorney General mentioned, egg, cheese, and milks 3 times a week. One single mother don't have the job and worry to put the food on the table for children, and then jacking up the price and blaming the supply chain. We don't know who's the loser here, but what we do know, loser is always blaming someone. So they are blaming the supply chains. We don't know at this time who's the loser. They are the loser? Loser is the blamer? Or Connecticut resident is loser? Attorney General and our leadership, they will find out very soon. So with that, I want to thanks to our Majority Leader and President, Attorney General, all my colleagues standing behind. Thank you. Thank you for stand up for Connecticut resident. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I also want to thank my little brother, A.G. Tong, and for joining this initiative, and Bob Duff. Thank you, Senator Duff. You're always standing on the right side of things, and you're always looking out for the vulnerable and making sure that the people of Connecticut can have a decent living. And so my little brother said earlier that I always get on him about eating healthy. When you're on your low income, you really don't have that choice. Now with the price gouging, it's even worse. Just imagine someone that's on food stamps, that's receiving food stamps, they have this EBT card. How far is the money gonna go? How far is the money gonna go for that family? And remember, there was a rollback of the funds that we received during COVID, and so a lot of those funds were reduced. And so I want to thank you, because when I go to the store and I'm trying to eat healthy, I'm like, I should just get some sugar water and call it a day, because it's very, very expensive. And so again, I want to thank our leadership, Senator Looney. As Senator Kushner said, he's always standing behind us, and he's always standing on the right side of things as well. And so again, and I have to say this to you, Attorney Tong, that what you've done since your tenure as AG has been remarkable. You take care of, you're interested in, you make sure that the residents of the state of Connecticut rights are protected. So I thank you. And I think you like to fight too. But I really do thank you, sir, because you have done a remarkable job since being AG. So again, thank you all for being here. My colleagues, thank you as well.
Thank you, Pat. I appreciate that very much, and your comments and everybody's comments. And you can't do this without support of colleagues in your caucus to help you to to make these announcements and to have everybody's support. So thank you so much. And of course, again, the Attorney General, there's no other folks I'd want to go into battle with than some of these folks behind me and our entire caucus, obviously. So with that, we'll answer some questions.
Can you tell us how many, Mr. Attorney General, can you tell us what chains that you'll be writing to? How long do you expect this to take? And when will we be seeing the letter of inquiry attached to the release?
We're working on it now. This was fast moving. I expect that we'll reach out to everybody that we can find. And we expect businesses here in Connecticut to cooperate with a letter from the Attorney General's office. And so I hope that we'll get information soon. I suspect that this will go through successive rounds, that we'll ask some questions, and then you start pulling that thread and you want to ask more questions.
Well, the FTC study looked at 9 major retailers, and I think only 2 of them have operations in Connecticut. Maybe I'm wrong here. Will you be contacting, say, Stop and Shop?
Sure.
Big
Yeah.
Quad,
Yeah.
you know, the small independents?
You can expect all of them. My expectation is it's not fair just to limit it to the large national chains, and that we'll have to focus on some local retailers to get a flavor. It'll be a good point of comparison, frankly, as to what the local mom and pop in the Danbury area is charging vis-a-vis a global supermarket chain. So we'll see. I should also note that we're in close contact on a number of fronts with the Federal Trade Commission. We do work with them all the time, and so we're in communication with them about this issue, and so hopefully, and we expect that if this matures and we find actionable wrongdoing, that we'll bring them in as a partner.
Lots of things are more expensive now. Housing, the price of a car, a lot of that has to do with the price of goods. So why single out groceries as
Because we need it to live, and we would focus on all of those if we had the bandwidth to focus on every commodity and every good and service that we need. But you can't find a more important commodity than basic sustenance, and so it makes sense that we would focus on this and that Senate Democrats would focus on it.
Well, we've also seen with cars and other goods, some prices drop. We have not seen that at the grocery store. And all you got to do is spend 5 minutes outside a grocery store and ask every consumer coming out of that store whether they've seen prices come down. They'll probably tell you no. And as the FTC report said, a lot of the profits are up, and while other supply chains issues have come down and prices have come down, those have not. And we see it in the results of the profits and how that's pushing inflation. So that's why I think this is so important. And again, hearing and listening to the people of the state of Connecticut when they're coming out of the grocery store, we know exactly what we need to do.
And they have no choice. We talked about our phones last time we were here. I need a new phone, but I can wait. If you need a new car, you can wait. As my big sister over here said, if you have an EBT card and you have to feed your family tonight, there's no waiting, right? You have to pay what they're charging you at whatever store is close to your house. And by the way, if you don't have transportation, God bless, you're stuck.
The other question I had might be a little bit more political. I mean, the economy is a huge factor in the presidential election, right? And for all indications, the economy is looking good, but inflation continues to be an issue there. So if the national statistics and indicators show that inflation is the problem, why don't you believe that it's the problem with groceries?
Well, it's not the problem, it's a factor, but there are a lot of factors, which is the whole point of this inquiry, is to understand, look, this is not our first rodeo, okay? So we know that people can blame inflation and fly right underneath inflation, the rate of inflation, and charge more money than they should and make more money than they should and take advantage of people. So that's why we're here.
Well, again, we talked about, you look at this sheet here, it says corporate profits after tax in the United States from 2000 to 2022. The charts show it. And again, it's estimated that price gouging is responsible for 50% of inflation.
Yeah.
And again, you have corporate profits that are 70-year high, and on top of that, you've got, when it comes to, like we talked about beef and chicken and everything else and what's good for us or what's not good for us, but there's only 4 companies now that control the processing of 80% of beef, and nearly 70% of pork, and almost 60% of chicken. And we're seeing that the federal government is not regulating that as much as they need to, and there are fewer companies who will control more of the market. That means that prices are going up, and consumers are caught in the middle, and they're the ones who are paying, while profits continue to go up. It is the role and the responsibility of a government to then to investigate and to make sure that and have them work within the parameters of the law. And if the law isn't strong enough, it's our job to make it stronger.
Mr. Majority Leader, though.
One thing, if I might add on that, just we're looking at a different kind of profiteering and price gouging here. Our other laws dealt with a situation that was of limited duration and either products or services that became crisis points because of a particular crisis, if you will. So, for instance, all of a sudden, a dry ice becomes a crisis only in the days after a hurricane. The temperature goes back up to 90 degrees. Same is true with generators. Snow rakes and snow removal services are a crisis for a limited duration of time after you've had a blizzard. But what we're talking about here is something much more pervasive. If there's and much more sophisticated, so that if the pandemic and supply chain issues are being used as a cover for a longer-term raise in prices beyond what's being justified, that's a much more serious problem. And also, as I said, we're not talking about snow rakes and generators and dry ice here. We're talking about things that people need every single day of the year. So it really is a crisis of a different order.
Well, you're up there, Marty. Can I ask you, Bob? I can imagine a Republican response will be, here are the Democrats trying to deflect attention away from the effects of inflation, the effects of policies that Connecticut Democrats and President Biden have supported and advocated and instituted. You guys are just doing this to draw attention away from democratic responsibility for as a factor in the inflation.
Well, I'm sure they'll say that as a partisan way, as they often do. But again, thanks to Senator Duff for bringing this FTC report forward and showing that this now indicates that there is, in fact, a real problem here that can't be ignored. I remember when we had one of our price gouging bills on the floor, looking to expand it from entities and objects to services. I remember a number of Republicans got up on the floor and said, this is interfering with business. It's whatever the market will bear. Too bad if there's a snowstorm. Too bad if there's a hurricane. That's the market. Even if it's only a temporary market, we shouldn't be interfering with it. I mean, that's the mindset of many Republicans. So in this case, we'll see more of the same, I'm sure.
I'd like to hear from Bob. Thank you.
Thanks.
No, come on. You let off here. I would like to hear your response to this.
Hey, look, I think the Republicans should come down here and join us. Join us on this, because this is something that's impacting Democrats, Republicans, red, blue, wherever you are, purple. This is an issue that all of us here think is important. And we know it's important because we hear about it from our constituents every single day. And our job is to pull back the layers of the onion, an expensive one nowadays, to say that this issue is really not inflationary, but it's more profits and greed. And I have no problem with profits, but it's the greed. And that's what we're asking the Attorney General to look into, which he's agreed to do. And that's what we should be talking. We should demand that we get this information from our grocery stores. And again, our role and responsibility is to make sure that folks are playing within the parameters of the law. And if the parameters are not there, or they're not strong enough, it's our job to make the law stronger for folks.